Hello and welcome to the Friday edition of the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. I'm back again as your host, and I'm joined by my partner in crime as usual, Samuel Luckhurst. Samuel, how are you?
Yep, very well, thank you. Partner in crime indeed, after the York and Cole collaboration, five-a-side and midweek. Warming up nicely for the press game.
There's definitely a connection there. There's some goals and assists flying around. I was pleasantly surprised actually. A few good goals as well. So not a bad
Yeah,
performance
just
from either of them, I don't think.
indeed, I think if you've not got Liam Corliss on your team these days, it seems to be more of a help than a hindrance. Maybe his press game performance last season, that's when his level dropped off. Unfortunately, who knows?
Well, Liam's, I think he's fallen victim to the BS, Samuel, as many people do in the late 20s. It catches up to a lot of if you don't exercise. And I think
I think
that
he's in his
might be
thirties.
Liam's
In
problem.
fairness,
Yeah, well, there you
yeah,
go. Exactly. He's not getting
yeah.
any younger. In this podcast, we're going to look in the first section at a keeper cell kind of widget that we've done. Our editor has created this thing where you can jump into articles and decide which players to keep as So me and Sammy are going to run through the squad really and discuss that and who to keep and the merit of that, etc. In the second part, we're going to look at Eric Ten Hag's interview with Gary Neville, which aired on Friday morning. We're recording this episode around 10 a.m. on Friday. And then the third part, we'll look ahead to the Crystal Palace game, which is, of course, on Monday night at Selhurst Park. Samuel, you just said that it's going to be a 4 a.m. Return to Manchester, which suggests that you're not actually getting a hotel for that game, are you, on Monday night?
No, it's another road trip for well, not the three of us, because unfortunately you're not well, or fortunately maybe for you, you're not
That's the
making
way
the
I'm
trek to
approaching it.
you're not making the trek to Selhurst Park. It does remind me. I did a I think it was Easter Monday, so that was a bank holiday Monday. Selhurst Park evening game for Palace City back in 2015. So I think the circle has closed in one way or another for Monday's upcoming game. A ridiculous and disgraceful kick-off time, but there's nothing new there. And fair play to United for right into the Premier League and siding with the supporters over the issue. It's completely unacceptable.
Yeah, there's been some horrible kick-off times for fans and journalists alike, but I don't think we'll get much sympathy or put away our
No.
violins. We'll jump into the squad then, Samuel. Obviously, a caveat here: there are bound to be players who are out of contract that we discuss. Um, if we say get rid, it means get rid. It doesn't mean sell them, of course, because United physically or practically cannot sell them now as we head into the summer window. So we'll just start with the goalkeepers in Samuel. I'll say a name. You'll see what you think, I'll say what I think, and we'll just progress like that. But we'll start with the number one. It's actually number 24, but Andre Onana, the first choice goalkeeper at Manchester United.
Keep, logically, no need to cause any upheaval there. And I actually do think he'll have benefited from this season. I think he'll be more dependable next season.
Yeah, definitely keep. Obviously had a difficult start, didn't he? But he's come good. I just hope to see him eradicate those mistakes out of his game. We saw that last week, didn't we? And we saw it in the opening day of the season against Wolves when he got away with it, but he didn't against Burnley. So hopefully
Hmm.
he can improve next year. Tom Heaton, he's coming to the end of his contract.
Keep, good character, deserve more opportunities. He would, from what I understand, would be open to a coaching role tagged onto it. And although you can have a bit of overkill in terms of like former players, and there's the risk of having an old boys club mentality. I don't think that's the case at United now, and he's still in really good nick as well. And you need an experienced backup, whether it's number two or number three. So I think keeping him around the place as a player and going beyond that as in a coaching role, that would be logical.
Yeah, definitely keep Tom Heaton. It's hard to find a replacement for such a player, isn't it? Really, when you're kind of playing that backup role, maybe third choice goalkeeper. If you're going in the market and signing a player like that, it's difficult. And he's such a great presence around Carrington. He's obviously an academy graduate himself. He knows what it means, and he is very useful in that regard. So yeah, I'd keep Tom Heaton too. And then Altay B and Dia, who we've really not so much of have we since he arrived from Turkey.
Have to be receptive to a sale just by virtue that he's played one game, and as you say, we don't really know a great deal about him. I think he's one of those that you couldn't really care less whether he stays or goes. But you don't want two goalkeepers going in the same summer. I'd say I don't think they'd want that much upheaval in that area. So if one is to go logically, there's 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 only one goalkeeper there who you could get a fee for. So have to be receptive to selling him is what I would say. If indeed there are any takers.
I agree again, but I will just say to the listeners, I don't expect to be agreeing with Samuel for all the squad. There will be some disagreements, but yeah, I agree with Bay and Dia. We're moving on to the
Just
defenders
get
then,
let's get
Samuel.
Aaron Wan-Bissaka out the way, and you can say stay 10-year
No,
contract.
we'll come to him. We'll come to him. I'm going for it logically. I'm doing it off the website. So Victor Lindelof is next.
Sell out of contract next year. Been at the club 7 years. They need to get fees for players. He's a player that has to be sold. He is a sellable asset.
Yeah, I'd sell Lindelof. He's never been really good enough to start consistently for United, has he? I mean, he had a purple patch of form last season in the spring, of course, when he was playing pretty well. But
He was.
yeah, I'd get rid of him now. And as you say, if it's one of the last chances to raise a fee, then you've got to move him on, unfortunately, and then kind of strengthen that defensive back line. Harry Maguire.
Keep, given his form this season, what a respectable season he's had, and also with three other centre backs likely to go or could go, you need some form of continuity there. United want to bring two centre halves in, and so keeping him certainly for at least another season, I think that's a logical strategy given how he's done this season. But should the club come in with a sizable and agreeable fee, you can't turn your noses up at it. That I think that applies with most players, but provisionally, I'd have him in the keeps.
Yeah, I'd definitely keep him. There is going to be defensive upheaval come on to Rafael Varane and Johnny Evans, and I think when you look at Harry Maguire and Lissandro Martinez, I think they're the guarantees are not to stay in that defensive line for next season or to make up that pecking order. I think he's had a fantastic year. His character, his determination, his resilience that he's shown to kind of bounce back from those two poor seasons has been really impressive. And he's playing some of his best football, I think, in United shirt almost when he first signed and he had that great first year. He's played that well. And his leadership as well, I think you made the point that he's actually more important now than he was when he was captain, which is also
Yeah,
impressive.
and do you know what I was thinking? Just watching Spurs last night, that he would probably now get in the majority of Premier League 11s, because if there's a defence that could do with Harry Maguire, it's Tottenham. So that's what I mean in terms of if a club out there make an acceptable fee, you've got to be receptive to it. And as I said to you earlier in the week, there's a bit of a Newcastle connection there with his agent Kenny Shepherd, who's the son of Freddie Shepherd. So I imagine there would be more of a market for him this year than there was last year. And let's face it, West Ham wasn't a bad option last year. They
It's
they just won a
interesting though, isn't it,
trophy and they were in the Europa League. Got a good front
when it,
six. I think they've missed a presence like Maguire this season in defence.
when a club like West Ham comes in, I think we all look from the outside, and I think that would be a logical move. As you said, you just listed the reasons why. Won a European trophy. They're on the periphery of the Champions League places. But if you are a player at Manchester United, you to get to that position, you believe in your own ability and you back yourself. It's the only way you're going to get to
Yeah,
that kind of standard. And Maguire
and he
wasn't going
has
to drop down to
absolutely.
West
Yeah.
Ham so willingly. Yeah, exactly. And he's backed himself and he's been vindicated. So fair play, Harry Maguire. Lissandro Martinez.
Oh, keep. Despite the injury issues, he's it sounds strange to use the word potential with a was he 26-year-old Martinez or 27-year-old, but Manchester United are a much better team when he's in it and at his optimum. So he's a definite keep.
Nobody can play the kind of passing role in the build of play that Martinez can, and that's the team from the defender. So definitely keep Martinez despite his injury problems this season. It's been a shame to see him ruled out for so long. Nice little segue then, talking about injury problems. Tyrone Marshall.
Will anyone want him? But for one, but if it's one or the other, sell. 2 years in at United, you know, mediocre at best decent first season, absolute write off of the second season. He can't be filed among the keeps, so you have to be open to selling him.
Yeah, I'd definitely sell him. He had a spell where he obviously broke into the team and got over Luke Shaw, but Luke Shaw fought back and got into the side. And to be honest, I've got doubts over whether he actually is Premier League quality, Malacia,
Yeah.
and that's without the injury concerns. We'll move on to Rafael Varane then.
Well, that's neither. Sorry, not neither. That's he's a player
Yeah, but
who
would you keep
literally
him or?
cannot be sold. But
Yeah,
it's got to the point naturally. I think he's come to the end of the road at United that he has to be released. He's been a decent player for United, but just far too many layoffs, too many injuries. In fairness to him, this season, the separate layoffs he's had, I think 4 of them have just been one game absences for very minor issues. But he's broken down at the wrong time, given that it's a run in, given the amount of defenders that are missing. And it was telling that Ten Hag again said last week, and I know Ten Hag may not have the final say come what may, but the fact that there hasn't been any progress in the contract, I think everyone expects him to go.
yeah, I'd let him go. It's been an interesting few years for Varane. It's been an all right signing. I think we talked about that on a few podcasts ago. I think he's just been okay, hasn't he? Not been phenomenal because of the results and the wider team context, but he's not exactly been terrible either. He's done his part and he's been United's
Probably a
best defender
6
on
out
the
of
Premier
10
a lot
signing
of the times.
overall. I'd say
Yeah,
he was
that's
very good
very
last
fair.
season. When he didn't play in the first season, they did really miss him, and has he had a good season this season? I don't think you could say so, but he did have a reasonably decent spell before the March internationals. But it's been too variable. So I think overall, he's been a decent signing, but he's not hit the heights that, of course, United would have hoped he would have.
Yeah, and you can't continue to be one of the club's highest earners when your injury record's just so poor, can you?
Yeah,
It's just not on, really. So moving on to Diogo Dalot.
keep hardly ever injured. Started all but is it 3 or 4 games this season. I still think he can kick on as well. I think there was maybe a little spell earlier this season where he was playing really well, but I think in terms of his time at United, it's still the first 3 months of last season where he was probably one of the best fullbacks in Europe on form, and he took that form into the World Cup and ousted João Cancelo. He's 25, so I think he can still get better. And he signed a contract last year as well, which was a logical move by the club. Again, unless you're getting silly, unless a club are offering silly money for him, he's the plan has got to be to keep him.
Yeah, no brainer to keep Diogo Dalot, isn't it? I've probably been a doubter of Dalot, haven't I? I think Samuel on the podcast, but he's impressed us this season. He's really
Yes,
turned it
yeah,
around because he had that kind of dip in form. But he's been very consistent. He started almost every game in the Premier League, and he can of course play on either side. So his versatility is attractive as well. And Diaz fans to him. Luke Shaw.
keep when he's on form, when he's fit, he's one of the best fullbacks in Europe, and when you play him at centre back, he's one of the best centre backs in the Premier League. He is a terrific footballer, but just far too brittle. And there's not really going to be a market for him due to his injury issues. The fact that he's turning 29 in the summer, again, unless a club come in with silly money, and let's face it, they're not going to, then the working assumption is that he's absolutely staying next season. And Manchester United are a much better team with him in it as well.
Yeah, I'd absolutely keep Luke Shaw. I think it's unfair actually, or maybe not unfair. It's probably the wrong word. There's been accusations obviously around his injury record and kind of people have crunched the numbers, and I think it works out that he's actually not been available for 50% of the games across his whole
Mm.
United career. But 2 points on that. I think number one, obviously he had that horrific leg break, with double leg break, wasn't it? Which he almost actually lost his
Yeah.
leg, which was so unfortunate. You can't really blame Luke Shaw for that. And secondly, I've made this point earlier in the season. I don't think he's been handled properly this season. There's been a few instances of coming back from injury and playing 5 games in I think 17 or 19 days, and that's actually happened twice. So pardon me, if you have a player coming back from muscle injury with an injury record like Luke Shaw's, surely you have to handle him a bit more tentatively and give him a chance to reset and recharge. So I don't think he's been given the best chance to stay fit this season. So it'll be interesting when he comes back. It'll be towards the end of the season, won't it? But see how he's handled next year. Hopefully he can kick on and stay fit. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Samuel.
Sell out of contract next year. 5 years at United. His best season was his first season. They looked to get rid of him after his third season. Had a respectable second half of last season, but he's been filler for most of this season. He actually started the season and started quite well, but he got injured. I think quite early on. There's just not a logical reason to. I mean, who the hell would give Aaron Wan-Bissaka a new contract? Ed Woodward probably would have, or Cliff Beattie, but fortunately for United, they're not calling the shots anymore.
I'm going to surprise you with this one because you presume I'm going to say keep. However, his contract situation.
At least you're sticking to your
It,
guns here.
well, no, because with his contract situation, it forces you to sell him, doesn't it? Because he's only got 1 year left on his deal, and it is the last chance to raise a fee from him because it's obviously triggered that 1 year extension. So I personally would have actually given, and you laugh at this, maybe a 2 or 3 year deal. And you just said Ed Woodward would do that. So maybe I am a Bristol
Yeah.
University graduate. He's a great defender, one of the best one-on-one defenders in the Premier League. His attacking capabilities are limited. We know that. And he does not provide as much as he should going forward. But I think he's had a hard time of things in the last few months. But he's predominantly been playing at left back. And I never look at Wan-Bissaka and think he can play at left back. Diego Dallo, yes. But I just do not look
Brandon
at
Williams, right
Wan-Bissaka's
foot, who
qualities.
can play at left back.
Well, we're about to come on to him, but it doesn't mean every right back shouldn't be able to play at left back. I don't buy into that
No,
narrative. I don't
I
agree with
agree.
that.
I agree.
Yeah. And last season, when you think of his renaissance, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and kind of how he was held above Dallo in the pecking order in the regard, I thought he was fantastic. His time probably is coming to an end, and it probably does make sense to sell him. But I just thought it was worth putting those.
Not
Putting that
not
defence
probably.
forward of
It just does
Wan-Bissaka.
make sense to sell him, but we've disagreed on one anyway. I was worried
Yeah,
that we
a
were
slight
going to agree
disagreement.
on literally every
Well, I
club,
agree that you
crossover
should.
club,
I
every
agree
player.
that they should sell him. So kind of agree, disagree. Brandon Williams. We'll keep this one quick.
Release.
Yeah, release. Johnny Evans.
Release. Had he not broken down in the, when was it, mid-March, I think, then I think he might have been a very strong case to keep, because his performances have been pretty good this season, and maybe I'll change my mind in 3 or 4 weeks if he's played regularly in the running and can stay fit. But as it stands, I'd go with release. Keep Maguire, keep Martinez, bring two centre backs in. I think that's a pretty logical approach.
I'm gonna keep Johnny Evans. I mean, even in January time, he was in
It's
probably.
a fair shout.
Yeah,
Fair
yeah, he had
shout.
an outside chance of winning the Sir Matt Busby Player of the Year award, which was remarkable considering there was such a surprise seeing him come into training last summer, and we kind of didn't expect him to sign. But I guess the red herring was club sources saying that they couldn't rule it out off the table. So I think that was probably the smoking gun, really suggesting that he could. He did, and I think he's been fantastic when he's played. He probably thought that game at Turf Moor was going to be the highlight, but he's kicked on. He's played way more than he thought he would, and he's delivered each time. I think it is a valid point that his body has broken down in the spring, but he's actually only missed 10 games through injury this season with smaller muscle injuries and concerns. So I think the problem was when he signed from Leicester, could he stay fit? He has through the first half of the season. It's been a shame to see him out recently, but I think, yeah, you're right. If he can kind of put together a string of games in the last few fixtures now, it would be great to see. And I think a 12-month deal might make sense because of the defensive upheaval elsewhere. I think if you retain him, Maguire and Martinez.
You've made a very good case for it there. As I said, I'd be kind of like 50-50 or 51-49 on it, and as I said, my mind could change in a few weeks' time if he's playing regularly and staying fit. It's one of those that United can be flexible with, can't they, as well?
Yeah, completely.
Given that he's boyhood fan, come through the academy, there's not going to be a real market for him in the summer. Lives in the area. His wife works for MUTV. If they want to come to an arrangement, it's going to be very easy to do, I would imagine.
Regardless of what happens with Samuel, it's been fantastic to see him back in United shirt, hasn't it, this season?
He's been, as I said, that Burnley game, I think I said at the time, like if this is the highlight of Johnny Evans' season, then so be it. Like, hats off to him because he played really well. But then he played even better at Anfield on a day that most people thought it was going to be a case of how many Liverpool would win by, and United got a very creditable 0-0 draw. I think he started against Liverpool in the FA Cup game, didn't he? When he came on at Chelsea for Varane at half time, he was brilliant. And then unfortunately, after 20 minutes, he had to go off. He did very well against Manchester City. I mean, United actually, they fell to pieces a bit after he came off against City. I think they were pretty compact that day. It was by far possibly the most compact they've been all season in terms of game management. But him coming off, that was probably the turning point in that game because it was at 1-1, and then Willie Camboala, raw player, he looked his age, he looked as inexperienced as he was, and City scored a couple of late-ish goals to eventually make it a predictable derby. But that's a gauge of how important Evans has been this season, that United did kind of fall to pieces when he came off at the Etihad.
Very well said. Moving on to Alvaro Fernandez.
Oh, amazingly, he's never actually played for the first team. I think it's one of
Well, he
those
should have made his debut,
misconceptions.
shouldn't he? We've
He
talked about
should
this a
have
few
under
times at Sellers
Rangnick.
Park on the final season when
Yeah,
Rangnick was in
I
charge. Alex
agree.
Telles
Rather
started.
than
Why
rather than
Alex
Alex
Telles was starting
Telles.
was bizarre.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And he didn't even. I mean, I think Shola Shorty came on that day. He absolutely should have made his debut by now, but just by virtue of his standing and the fact that he's had 3 different loans now, and there's going to be a bit of resale value there. So sell. I'm not too sure whether he'll be triggering the playing enough games to trigger Benfica's obligation to buy, but
They've still
he's
got
been
the option.
he's
So
still
they've
a
obviously
credit
got
to the academy. He's a credit
they've
to the
got the
academy in that they
obligation, but
identified the talent.
sorry, Samuel, I'm interrupting.
No, it's all right. No, obviously, as you said, they've got the obligation, but it depends on how many games he plays, and I can't quite remember how many it is. I think he's played 10 times for them.
It's easier to do these podcasts in person because the conversation flows pretty easy and we don't cut across each other. But what I was trying to say, sorry, is you would have forgot this. This was said at the time that they do actually have the option still to pay €6 million, regardless of that obligation. So the obligation was included, but regardless of that getting hit or not, they still have the option, which was just making it very flexible, I think, the deal. So it looks like it's going to happen now. Benfica for around €6 million, yeah, and there are add-ons inserted. And I think United have been happy with those kind of deals that they've negotiated. Yeah, it's very decent for him, I reckon. But a shame that he didn't make his debut, so yeah, sell. Willie Camboala.
Keep as a reserve. He is raw, but I think he does have the attributes to become a reasonable centre half for United. And if he has a bit more playing time, if he looks more accomplished, but he's still clearly not quite good enough, then there's resale value there. So for unless there's a decent fee that comes in the summer for him, I think it's again you've got to be flexible there, but provisionally you'd have him down as keep.
I'd keep, and I'd probably send him out on loan, actually. I think it's kind of hard for centre halves to break into the side at really young ages. Look at William Saliba at Arsenal when he went out on loan to France and how much that helped them mature. So maybe Camboala could benefit from a loan like that. Moving on to midfielders, should we skip over Sofian Amrabat? But bear in mind, he's just on a loan, and we'd both agree United should not keep him. He's an irrelevance, isn't he?
Definitely. Yeah. There's
Mason
keep,
Mount.
there's sell, there's release, and in his case, there's return.
I hope they kept the receipt. Mason Mount.
I think it's one way or the other. I mean, let's face it, nobody's going to come in with an acceptable fee for him. I have every confidence he'll be at United next season, but equally, just to say, oh, he's an absolute must keep, I wouldn't go that far. So he's kind of almost one that I'm absolutely in the middle of. I'm on the fence on there, and that or I'm happy to go on the keep side or go on the sell side, but I fully expect him to be a United player next season and to be at the club beyond the closure of the transfer window. United feel as though that there's a really good player in there when he's injury free, and that he can be a pretty influential player for them beyond this season. But the way I didn't think they should have signed him. I didn't think he was the right player for United. I think he would have been a more suitable player for Liverpool under Klopp, and also the fact they've spent £55 million on a player just to essentially pay his wages and finance his medical bills, when he would have been out of contract this summer. It doesn't reflect very well on them at all. And it seems to be only United that these cock ups happen to, or that they're the team that's making the cock up. But I think the working assumption will be that he's going to be kept unless there's a team that really has a hankering for a player who has been injured frequently over an 18-month period and has not started in the Premier League in 6 or 7 months.
I agree with you in the sense that he shouldn't have been signed. When you're spending 55 million on a player, you don't really know where he's going to play, and for a position in deeper midfield that he's not actually played as well. He was obviously more prominent playing for Chelsea, especially with Kobbie Mainoo coming through as well. I think that was pretty illogical. However, I'm going to differ and I'll say strongly keep, because I think I agree with United's assessment. I think there is a player in there. I think there's been glimmers of that talent so far, but unfortunately he hasn't had a sustained chance to show it because he's picked up a few injury problems. So I think second season, put those behind him and give him a chance in his second year, and hopefully he can vindicate the price tag at some point. But that remains to be seen, because he really needs a position, doesn't he, Samuel? I hate that when players join a club and they don't really have a defined role. It doesn't really give you the best chance of success. Bruno Fernandes, who occupies the position that Mount wants to play.
I'll keep possibly their player of the year. He's been their best signing since Robin van Persie. He leads really well. I know he's a doubt for Monday, but I think we all still expect him to play on Monday, because he's just never missed a game through injury. And Manchester United are a far better team with him on the pitch. As flawed a player as he is, I think those flaws do make him, and I've no issue with his captaincy, with his position, with the way he plays. 9 times out of 10, I'd say. I don't think it would be good whatsoever for United next season, whether Ten Hag's the manager or whether it's a new manager, that Bruno Fernandes isn't there. I think whoever the manager is, they would need Fernandes in that team. Otherwise, I think it would be a much trickier season.
Is there 3 players on this list that are just instant keeps? And Bruno Fernandes is obviously one of those. What a fantastic football player. He could play for any club in Europe, in my opinion. And United are very lucky to have him. And you've just talked about kind of not ever missing a club game, which is still an amazing record. My brother texted me the other day and asked if he'd be available for Crystal Palace because he's got him in his fantasy football team. And I just went, look, he's never missed a game. And there's 9 days in between Burnley and Palace, so I expect to see Fernandes lining up with the captain's armband at Sellers Park. Christian Eriksen?
Sell, if possible. Unfortunately for him, he's actually looking older than he is now. He's 32. It's not that old for footballers. You think of Luka Modric, who's 38, and the way Real Madrid are using him is pretty masterful as well, in that he's not necessarily starting many games, but his influence is still quite profound when he goes onto the pitch, as we saw against City, more so in the first leg than the second leg, of course, where he missed the penalty. But unfortunately for Eriksen, of course, we all know what happened in Copenhagen nearly 3 years ago, and it's just it's a great story and rather remarkable that he recovered from that and not only played again, but played for one of the biggest clubs in the world. But in hindsight, I reckon United's probably looking at his contract and thinking, really wish that we'd agreed a 2-year plus with a +1 option instead of just a straight 3-year deal.
Are you saying he looks old because he shaved his head and grown a beard?
Do you know what you look at him at the start of last season, and he kind of looks he looks his age. He look, if anything, he looks a little bit younger than he would have been at the time, which would have been 30. But now, yeah, it's almost as if he's embraced that tried and
Captain's
tested.
bird's eye look.
No, that's not Captain Birdseye. It's a Scandi look, isn't it? You know, the beard and short cropped hair. It's almost as if he's just thought, yeah, this my time has come for this. Why not just embrace it and take ownership of it? But also his
Yeah, I'd
performances
sell out.
have not exactly been the most energetic or effervescent. Whereas last season, I thought he was very, very influential for United and a very good signing on a short term basis.
Yeah, I'd sell Christian Eriksen. I mean, the first half of last season, Ten Hag's first year in charge, of him, Casemiro, and Fernandes in midfield, that trio, I think they started together for like 13 consecutive games in the Premier League, and they were fantastic in the build up to Christmas. Obviously, Ericsson got that injury, didn't he? The horror challenge with Andy Carroll in the FA Cup, which was a really nasty tackle on his
Yeah, your
ankle.
brethren.
But yeah,
I know that. I know what you Geordies are like on the football
don't want to
pitch,
associate
leaving your
me with
foot
Andy
in.
Carroll, please. I'm getting an unfair reputation. But maybe Christian Eriksen can go to Turkey and maybe invest in a hair transplant. And he'd come back with bright new shiny teeth like Jurgen Klopp and a new head of hair. Everyone could do with that, couldn't they, I think? Ahmad.
I'm going to go keep because there are a lot of forwards who could leave and should leave, and he's not had a fair crack of the whip. And they have got the insurance of the +1 option to tie him to the club until 2026. And when he's come on this season, his impacts have mainly been positive. So I err on the side of keep with him.
Yeah, I'm going to say sell purely from the player's perspective as opposed to the club's. It probably would make some sense for United to keep him, but I just can't see him being used. I think it's a shame that we still don't know where his ceiling is yet. He's not really been given any meaningful opportunities, especially this season, of course. Ten Hag wanted to keep him around the squad for the second half of the campaign, but it's just not worked out. He scored that important goal against Liverpool. What a fantastic strike that was, but he hasn't really kicked on. And I think just for the sake of his career, I think he needs to leave and pursue regular minutes and regular starts at a decent level, which I think he can do. He's got the quality to do.
It's a
Casemiro.
fair shout that.
Casemiro?
Casemiro, oh, sell.
Yeah,
He's on his
sell.
last legs, and the FA Cup final could be his last dance in elite football.
We'll leave it at that. It's pretty simple. I think there's a few coming up that are very quick. Facundo Pellistri.
Sell, just because there'll be resale value in him. They only paid £9 million. He's had 3 different loan spells in La Liga now. He's not started many games for United. He's got a good reputation, good profile for that. A lot of clubs would be attracted to buy. His stock at international level is quite high. He started 2 of Uruguay's 3 games at the World Cup. I imagine he'll be starting the Copa America. So I think United should be targeting a pretty good fee for him. He is a good player, but
What is a good
it's
fee for Pellistri? We've had this conversation before. Like, could they get 50 million? I mean, they paid 9 million euros. 50 million would be fantastic, but who's paying that? All the clubs in Spain are broke, aren't they, really? They don't really have the funds.
yeah. But there must be. Like, I could see him in a Bundesliga team. I mean, he's very quick, isn't he? I don't think that. I mean, he obviously could probably do with being a little bit more robust, because whenever he did start for United, he was a bit too much of a pushover. Like Ahmad, his most memorable moments have been off the bench, and he did have very good impacts off the bench for United last season and this season. But when he had the opportunities as a starter, he never took his chance, unfortunately for him. But there will be a club out there that would pay a good fee for him. I've no doubt about it. And I think if anything, they should be trying to get a bit more. 20 million maybe sounds a little bit fanciful, maybe in euros rather than pounds. Even though the exchange rate, there's not always a great deal of difference between it. But you just think of his age, played in 2 major leagues in Europe, Uruguay international, played at the World Cup, will play at the Copa America this summer. I can't remember I don't think he played in the 2021 Copa America. When you factor all that into account and the relatively frugal fee United paid for him, I think they should be looking for a very good fee for him. Certainly more than they got for Anthony Elanga from Nottingham Forest last year.
So yeah, I think that's very interesting. I think they do very well. I think 50 million is probably unfair for Palestri actually. I'd sell him. I think if the you just talked about getting starts and not taking those opportunities. I think back to the Bayern Munich group stage game in the Champions League at the Allianz Arena. He obviously started that match and didn't really convince and regressed from that point. I think so. Yeah, time to move Palestri on and get rid. This one's pretty simple. Donny van der Beek,
Sell, sell, sell.
and I'll echo that.
If you
Sell, sell,
can,
sell.
if
Yeah,
possible.
if you can. Let's hope he doesn't listen to this podcast. Kobe Manu,
Keep.
generational talent. What a fantastic player. Such a wise head and young shoulders. Definitely resounding keep. Scott McTominay.
It's another 51-49, I think. I think provisionally keep, but if you're getting a good offer for him after a career best season, goal scoring wise, going to start at the European Championship, would be an asset in the majority of Premier League sides. He was receptive to moving to West Ham last year as well, and the idea of London living appealed to him. So you've got to be flexible, but where Casemiro has to go, where Ericsson has to go, Amrabat is going back. I think for now, have him in the keeps, but you've got to be receptive to selling him. Also, under profitability and sustainability rules, he would represent pure profit.
Completely makes sense, and yet I still believe I'm quite a strong keeper of McTominay. When you look at this United side this season and you take away his goals, you'd really fear where they would be in the table. He's scored some key moments really, and he's kind of single-handedly dragged them across the line a few times. You think of Brentford at home, Chelsea at home as well, scoring braces. So he's been excellent in that kind of role, and I just think he's got a role to play in the squad. That might not be starting every week, of course, and it definitely won't be because I don't think he's got the ability. The ability's pretty harsh, but he's not the standard to start for Manchester United every week if they want to challenge at the top of the Premier League. But I still think he's got a really good squad role to play. Dango,
Um, it could be another Zidane Iqbal, really, couldn't it? He's not done too much at Port Vale, unfortunately for him. Just keep, but with a view to sending him out on loan next season. Hopefully, he has a more fulfilling time out on loan.
yeah, well, he played literally one game and picked up an injury at Port
Yeah,
Vale, which is very unfortunate. A really big shame for Dango because I still think he's got quite a bit of potential. Whether that is to break into United's first team, I don't believe so, but I still think he can have a fantastic career elsewhere. Probably another loan, increases resale value, and sell him next summer, I think. Hannibal Medri.
Sell when he had his chances as a starter, similarly to Palestri this season as well. He didn't take them. I thought watching those games, he was far more productive off the ball than on it. When he got the ball, he didn't do too much with it. And when you're playing, as he was most of the time in those games, as a number 10, if you're not affecting the play on the ball, then your card is marked. So that they possibly they'll get a decent fee for him, but again, he's another loanee who has not had a particularly productive time of it at Sevilla. I think he's only had one La Liga start and not played in recent weeks.
Yeah, I'd sell Hannibal, and of course he's going into the final year of his contract now. They triggered that 1 year
Mm.
extension, so last chance to get a fee from him.
Yeah,
And I'd echo your comments really. It's a lot of commitment, a lot of running, a lot of dedication on the pitch. He runs his socks off for the
yeah.
shirt, but in terms of quality in the final third, I think that does lack in a player in that position. You've got to improve. Amari Forson, who United can't sell because he's out of contract at the end of the season.
Release.
Yeah, and I'm on that board as well. Release. We'll leave it there, Samuel, and we'll jump into the forwards in a second in part two. Welcome back to the second part of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, at the start of the podcast, I promised that we'd look into Ten Hag's interview, we'd discuss Ten Hag's interview with Gary Neville, but we're going to give that a miss today because the segments went on a little bit longer than we anticipated. So we'll finish off the forward, Samuel, and the keeper sell segment, and then we'll move on to the Crystal Palace preview for Monday night. So back to it, Anthony Martial.
Sell, 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 sell. But you can't sell him. Just release.
Get rid, it's time to go.
I think I was listing all
Completely.
the summers where he should have been sold there before I got to release.
I smiled when I saw his name on my screen because I knew I'd get an interesting reaction from you. Marcus Rashford.
Sell, or possibly loan with an option to buy. See if he wants to put it on him. Do you like this change of scenery, or do you want to come back to Manchester and prove yourself? But there's no way he has to be in the keeps. They've got to be finding a market for him. He blows hot and cold. He's crossed his manager more than once this season. His relationship with the match goers is broken. And I think if you were doing another poll now, should you keep or sell Marcus Rashford? Probably more than 70%, more than 80% would be saying sell of Manchester United supporters.
I've been tossing this one up in my head. I think if you look at it in the cold light of day and objectively analyse the situation and kind of a ruthless touch, it makes complete sense to sell him, doesn't it? I think it's very hard to make a case to actually keep him. On the other hand, I think I'm a bit of a softie, and he's a United Academy graduate. He's the poster boy of the club. He's come through. He's one of their own, and I think when you ignore Mason Greenwood, he's the best talent they've produced in the last 10 years or so. When he's on song, he's unstoppable. He's fantastic. We saw that last season. 30 goals. It was the best campaign of his career yet. I still like to think he can get back to that level. Unfortunately, he drops out of form far too often, and that is just so frustrating. And his body language hasn't helped. I think I'd give him one more chance next season. And if he doesn't return to those levels, that's it. It's time to go. But I can see it from both angles with Marcus Rashford. It's a really difficult one, I think. We'll move on to Rasmus Højlund.
Keep, but they need to sign a far more experienced and proven striker in the summer.
I agree. Keep Rasmus Højlund. He's showed a lot of potential, but I think it's unfair to have that burden on his shoulders of scoring all of the goals, and he needs support. Alejandro Garnacho.
Keep.
Keep and keep him away from Real Madrid, I think. Anthony.
Sell if at all possible, but I think it will be very difficult to do that, given the loss they would make, and also with the PSR rules and amortization, that the magic number would be something like £52 million, and nobody's going to pay that. So the best case scenario may be a loan. But if Ten Hag is in charge next season, I think all of us would expect Anthony to still be there, which, make of that what you will. But in terms of keep or sell, it would be sell.
Sell, and this might be a harsh statement, but I think he could be remembered as one of maybe the worst pound for pound signing in the Premier League. When you look at the transfer fee, he commanded £86 million, and what he's actually delivered on the pitch, it has just been incredible. It blows your mind, really. It really does. There was a positive little spell in the last few weeks. His performance at Stamford Bridge was excellent. I did my morning piece that day. We were both at that game in London, and I praised him to the high heavens in that piece. I thought he was fantastic, and he really deserved praise, but he's not kicked on. And I struggle to see a player in there that can really succeed in the Premier League for United. Jadon Sancho.
Sell. They may have to be a bit creative given his salary, and Dortmund wouldn't be able to afford his wage demands. But if Dortmund is home, then stay there and take the hit if you feel that wedded to them. But footballers very, very rarely think that way. I don't think Dortmund would struggle to afford a transfer fee for Sancho, and they've got the highest average attendance in Europe. They're in the Champions League semi-finals. They've got a pretty good chance to reach the Champions League final as well. And I think all the signs point towards Sancho being at Dortmund next season, but it may be another loan deal with an obligation to buy at the end of it, with a bit of compromising along the way. But as Ten Hag said yesterday, he has high value, and that's good for United, where he played so well in midweek against PSG. So I think it's I wouldn't. Ten Hag tried to suggest it was a win-win situation. I wouldn't go that far because I think Sancho exercised the nuclear option um, with the United manager, and they both can't be at United next season. I also think that with the Rashford situation, I don't think both of them. I don't think Ten Hag and Rashford can both be at United next season. And I'm not saying United should keep Rashford and get rid of Ten Hag. As I just said, I think Rashford should be sold, but it's a similar situation with Sancho as well. Fortunately for Sancho, he is one of the few senior loanees, probably the only loanee who's gone away and is enjoying himself, is doing well, and it's not a surprise because he's back on familiar in familiar territory at Dortmund.
Yeah, I'd absolutely sell Jadon Sancho. And I just thought the commentary was worth discussing. I don't know if you and Ty actually talked about it from the game, Dortmund's game against PSG. He had a fantastic game, to be fair to him, Sancho, and he had on the right wing as well, surprisingly. But he had a turn of pace that's probably been absent during his time in Manchester, and he was taking on his opposition full back. But I think a few points. Nuno Mendes, I don't think is very good. I think the commentary went
I
way
agree.
overboard. Ali McCoist and Fletch, as they call him, it was insane. Um, yeah, he's if you watch him every week for Dortmund, he's not played like that. It was a one-off
Yeah,
performance. I think he scored
and
three
also
goals and 2 assists in 16 appearances, which is not good at all.
Also, it is a mindset thing. He knows that that game is the only game on English television that evening that people are bothered about watching. Whether they've got a subscription to the rights holder or whether they've got a dodgy stick like some others and can access it. It's going to be watched by a hell of a lot of football fans in England, and it's easy to have that knee jerk reaction. I don't think his performance reflects damningly on United whatsoever. I think, if anything, it reflects damningly on him because that is his mindset. He does not have the mentality of a Manchester United player. He is not mentally capable of performing for Manchester United. It is different at Dortmund because it's not a pressure cooker environment. A fair play to him in midweek Champions League semi-final first leg. He turned up and he did perform, but I think that's the exception to the norm with Sancho, and it is a mindset thing. And I genuinely thought that before he signed for United, from speaking to people about him, that I didn't think he was right for United, even though it was obvious they were always going to sign him. I did not think he was as perfect a fit as a lot of people thought. And there's a reason why he's thriving for a club who never win the Bundesliga title, who, apart from this season, almost always go out the Champions League at the round of 16. The best case scenario is the German Cup, and the media scrutiny is restricted to the border of Germany. From the outside, who's looking at Dortmund and writing inquests about Borussia Dortmund if they go on a bad run of form? It hardly ever happens. So he's able to operate kind of under the radar. And fair play to him, as I said, he took his chance in the week. He'll have known that that game would have been watched by a lot of English football followers. But that performance said a hell of a lot more about Sancho than it did United. And United are very, very easy targets just because a loanee has gone there and had a very good game in a very high profile game.
Very well said. And I thought it was amazing that I picked up on this. I think it was around 75 minutes when the commentators said, "Oh, you have to be delighted for him because of the way he's been treated." And I just thought to myself, hang on a
Oh,
minute. This
idiot.
United give him 3 months off. They handled that situation so well. Not many clubs would do that. When obviously Sancho had his off-pitch struggles, and United, I think, handled it brilliantly. Personally, he was given a chance to come back into the team, and he hasn't progressed since then. And then all he needed to do was apologise or simply not take to social media and disagree with his manager after calling out his training performances. It's not exactly like Ten Hag was overly critical, Samuel. You just said he hasn't been training well. So to react like that, we got into it at the time. There's no really need to get back into it, but extraordinary, really, from Sancho's perspective. Last two, Shola Shoretire.
Release, they can't sell him, can they?
Yeah.
Quite hyped at one point, or certainly very prominent. I remember when he was a 14-year-old training with the academy, and it might have been at their preseason camp in Austria back in 2018. But for a myriad of reasons, he's just not got close to ever looking like he was going to settle in the first team at United.
Yeah, it's time to move him on. I was actually really impressed with him for the under-21s earlier in the season. I think 9 goals and 14 appearances, and he was wearing the captain's armband in a lot of games. He obviously should have went out on loan. He's outgrown the academy, and I think maybe a career in League One or the Championship awaits for sure, Thierry. And then lastly, Mason Greenwood.
Sell.
Yeah,
Another
simple for me.
forward who's on loan who should never play for United again for a wildly different reason to why Jadon Sancho shouldn't play for United again.
I'll completely echo that. And we'll move on, Samuel. Thank you for that segment. We'll move on to the Crystal Palace preview. But before we do that, if you agree or disagree with anything that me and Samuel have said, let me know in the comments. Slag off. We do like it occasionally. So let me know what you think of our choices.
I never see it. So it makes no difference
our
to me.
producer used to send the occasional comment to me, you see. So that's all. But he's gone now. He's gone. Anyways, Crystal Palace.
What
Monday
tragedy
night
that
at Sellers
is.
Park. Palace have actually turned around their fortunes in the last few weeks since the appointment of Glasner. Samuel, been quite impressed. Evans and Marshall are back in training. Obviously, the press conference yesterday, so we do have the benefit of the team news. Are you expecting any changes to the side? I presume if Evans is fit, he will play, and Casemiro will be moved back to midfield.
That's an option. I'd quite like to see Mount start in this game. It's been aeons since he last started in the Premier League. And if you can't hack it at Crystal Palace away, then as a Manchester United player, then God help you, really. I think that I also think just for the planning purposes, say, of the Arsenal game, I don't think it would necessarily be beneficial for Maguire, who, provided he's fit, will absolutely start against Marshall. I don't think it'd be beneficial for him to potentially have three different partners in 3 games running, because of course he started alongside, and it has started alongside Casemiro in the last 3 matches. If Evans was to come in, and then say Martinez is deemed fit enough to start on the Sunday, I doubt he will be, but maybe he is being prepared for that game, and he will just come back into the team as a starter rather than coming off the bench. Then there is some logic to continuing with Casemiro alongside Maguire, but with Evans back in training, and given how much Ten Hag has highlighted the absence of centre backs available to him throughout the season at various points, I think it's safe to assume that it will be Evans and Maguire starting, with then Casemiro going back into midfield alongside Mainu. As I said earlier, although Fernandez has got he's got it looks almost like a cast on his hand at the moment, which I think he has actually got a broken hand. I can't quite remember what the extent of the injury is, but as I said, when in probably one of the podcasts last week or the week before, when I spoke to him at Wembley and shook his hand, he had to shake hands with his left hand and looked quite fragile after having a nasty tumble. But then he still played 2 games in a week, so I still expect he will start that game. I mean, Palace have been a pretty good run since they beat Liverpool, although I don't think that they'd had that many wins under it's Glasner, isn't it? Not Gassner. It's Glasner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Glasner. Yeah, it seems to have clicked the last few weeks for Palace. I mean, there was
it
positives to
has.
take from their City performance, which I watched. It was an early kick-off on a Saturday, and then obviously beating Liverpool at
Yeah,
Anfield, beating West Ham, comfortably beating Newcastle. They didn't have a sniff that game at Selhurst, and then obviously a 1-1 draw with Fulham. It screams like a tricky fixture. This nighttime kick-off in London.
oh yeah, it definitely does. And as I said to you last night, messaged you during the Tottenham game, that if Chelsea beat West Ham on Sunday and if Newcastle avoid defeat to Burnley, then United would kick off at 8th in the Premier League, and 8th doesn't get you European football next season. So there would be some added pressure on top of just being Man United and going to try and get back to winning ways after a pretty. I mean, it's been a dire run of form in the league, and they've got two pretty big home games to come as well, against 2 of the top 4 from last season, and in Arsenal's case, a team that are made of serious stuff these days and are genuine title challengers and are really holding their own and have definitely made progress on last season. But Palace, and Ten Hag has said this a lot of times, he said the competitiveness in the Premier League is is the point now that there are no gimmies anymore. I mean, Burnley held their own against United last week. Sheffield United, who are dreadful side, even scored 2 goals against United. And I know that says more about United than Sheffield United, but in games like this with Palace, when you look at the 2 wingers they've got, who probably individually are worth the best part of 100 million each, 2 terrific players. Eze is a cracking player. It will be a real shame if he doesn't make the England squad for the Euros, but the competition is so intense that I think he's got to brace himself for disappointment. Elise is a lovely player to watch. I know he's had injury issues, and that is a red flag that has to be factored into it. Mateta, I hadn't really been that impressed with when I watched him, but it does seem like he's starting to find his feet a bit more recently, and his goals
With his
return this
shirt tucked in.
season. Yeah, his goals
It's
return this
brilliant.
season is the same as Hoyland's. So, and just looking at it now, in fairness, he got a hat trick against Plymouth in the League Cup at the start of the season, so you have to factor that into it. But he has still got as many club goals as Rasmus Hoyland this season. And Palace, I've always thought since they got back into the Premier League in 2013, there have been points where they've had the potential to be a consistent top 10 side, or possibly even break into the top 6 or top 7, or come close to it if they signed a really good striker. And they've never done that. But Mateta has started to show signs that maybe they've got a really serious front line now. And in Eze and Elise, they've got as I said, brilliant players. The one who's been one of the signings of the season is Wharton, who they got for 20
I was
million
just about to say
from
his name. Yeah, I
Blackburn
seen you
in
forgetting him.
January. He has been so impressive, and I think it's a matter of time until he gets capped by England. Just a really shrewd bit of business, and unfortunately for Palace, I suspect he will not be playing at Selhurst Park for the long term if he continues the way he's been playing. But they're an established. They've been an established Premier League club for over a decade now. They've had obviously some iffy spells, and I think the Hodgson experiment that had to end in the summer. That was a mistake to take it on into this season, as good a job as he has done overall for Crystal Palace. And I think they dealt with his departure in a very dignified way, and they've made a progressive appointment in Glasner. So, as you said, Selhurst Park is a very atmospheric ground, especially for evening games. United make hard work of it whenever they do win games, as we've seen quite often this season. So I would not be surprised in the slightest if this is another game where United drop points, but hopefully for them they can rise to the occasion and try and end this rut that they're in, because they've got to start taking more points from these final 4 games, because there is a real danger the way Chelsea are starting to show signs that they're clicking. And they were very comfortable winners against Tottenham last night. And although they've got some pretty mercurial players in their team, they've also got some really good talents their side if they can gel. And they have started to show signs that they're becoming more of an impressive collective unit. So they're on United's coattails. That United have not coped well with pressure this season, and there is an element of pressure going into this game ahead of, I would argue, 2 bigger games at Old Trafford against Arsenal and Newcastle.
I think if you're a mid-table Premier League club, you just dip your toes into the Championship and kind of sweep up the talent. Adam Wharton was signed from Blackburn. When you look at the last few years, Jared Bowe, Jude Bellingham, Adam Wharton, there's so much talent in the Championship that you can easily take advantage of, really, and just pluck off. So fair play to Palace for identifying him. You've just mentioned those games, Samuel, the remaining games of the season. Palace on Monday night, Arsenal at home, Newcastle at home, and Brighton away. Those next 3 games are fair for United. The remaining games of the season, especially building up to the FA Cup, where you would ideally like to build some momentum.
That's a very ominous statement, Stephen, but I can't disagree with it. Just going off the evidence of this season, a friend actually sent me a message last week and said, after the Burnley game, he said, I think we've taken our last point of the season today. Now, I know I've been accused of being the Grim Reaper, but even I didn't go that far.
That is unbelievably cynical, isn't it?
that wasn't my takeaway from it. He's been a season ticket holder for 50 years.
It's
Our
gallows humour,
family
isn't it, at this
friend.
point, I think, with some fans.
I think so. Yeah, and we've seen before when United have had not a great deal to play for ahead of an FA Cup final that the form the form can drop off. It certainly did. This is going back to a time when you were probably still in nappies, but going back to 2004, 2005, their league form approaching those two FA Cup finals was subpar because they they were going to qualify for the Champions League, but they couldn't win the title, so there was a pretty inevitable drop off. The league season in 2017-18 was, it petered out. They lost to Brighton. They drew away to West Ham in a god awful game. The final day of the season was pretty tedious, winning only 1-0 against Watford. Just very underwhelming, uninspiring games. So it's rare that United are in this position where they don't have a great deal to play for, as much as they'll be stressing the importance of getting in Europe next season. And I mean, that just says it all. The fact that their expectations have been scaled back from possibly challenging for the title to possibly qualifying for the Champions League to just qualifying for the Europa League or the Europa Conference League, that's a really galling admission for them to have to make. And Ten Hag was asked about it at his press conference yesterday and saying there were two routes into it. It's through the league table or it's by winning the FA Cup. But this is a team that finished above Liverpool last season. And now, points-wise, they're closer to Everton, who only last week confirmed their survival.
Ironically, I look at that FA Cup final with City, and I actually feel like they've got more of a chance than I can't say Crystal Palace or Arsenal, maybe Arsenal at home, but with it being a
I
one-off game
completely
against
agree.
Manchester City, your rivals, the
I
occasion
completely
getting up
agree.
for it. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Yeah,
No,
and they
I
will have
don't
that
think
behind them
it's.
heading into that game.
I completely agree with you. I don't think it's forced positivity whatsoever. I mean, there'll probably come a point close to the game where I'll write a piece on it. But if the right players back are available, and as you say, it's an FA Cup final, there's a sense of occasion about it. They were ahead at the Etihad at half time in March. They were beaten by an 80th minute winner from Phil Foden. If they've got their best players available on the day, I genuinely don't think City will take them to the cleaners. Now, I might be proved completely wrong come Cup final day, and City will have a merry dance on United's grave or Ten Hag's grave. But I think United will make a fist of it in the cup final. Put it this way, I don't think it will go as badly as it did against Coventry, even though they avoided defeat in that game.
Which is an incredible statement, isn't it, really? The 25th of
Very
May, the FA
strange
Cup
season.
final's on, so I feel like that's going to come around pretty quickly. Thank you very much for your time, Samuel.
Thank you, Stephen.
And thanks to the listeners. As usual, have a great weekend, and we'll be back on Tuesday because Monday's a bank holiday, and United, of course, play Crystal Palace on Monday night. See you then.